Welcome to Electrified, it's your host Dylan Loomis. So first up today, Tesla now has an official CCS Combo 1 adapter, so no more ordering from South Korea. This one listed for $250, supposed to be able to charge your Tesla up to 250 kilowatts, but this will of course depend on the charging station you're using. Tesla says this new adapter is compatible with most newer Tesla vehicles, while some vehicles may require a retrofit to ensure functionality with third-party CCS stations. This adapter will begin shipping within 2 weeks of order placement, and Tesla will be adding retrofit eligibility for S and X vehicles and older 3NYs currently designated as requiring a retrofit. Please check back early 2023 for availability. Now the questions are: 1, how long will this stay in stock? And 2, in the real world, what will the charging experiences be like across different brands? So now we'll just wait for those review videos to pile in. Next up, this was a cool find from Jordan at the Limiting Factor. Now yes, this has to do with a Tesla battery fire, but what they're saying is they spoke to friends at Tesla who shared this is by design. The battery pack in the Model 3 and Y, both designed with a top cover of steel and a bottom enclosure is aluminum. Once it hits high temperatures, the bottom will melt out and drop the pack to the ground, basically so the firefighting crew can easily access where the fire has originated. The firefighters on the scene said this fire may have been relatively easy to put out compared to others across the nation because the entire bank of batteries dropped on the ground underneath the vehicle. So at least on the Model 3 and Y, having the bottom of the battery pack be aluminum so that part can essentially melt away in case of a fire and drop the cells to the ground separate from the car is definitely a nice engineering feature. Naturally now a lot of people are asking, well, will this work with a structural pack? And while I definitely don't know for sure, my initial guess would be no. But like I said, that's absolutely just a guess. Next up, during a public hearing yesterday, Tesla has been granted a conditional use permit for their new drive-in theater in Hollywood, California. In this picture, it's just going over some different elevations, but you do see it is still intended to be a 2-story building. And checking out the floor plans, go ahead and pause if you'd like. It's tough to really be confident what exactly this is showing, other than it is indeed a circular building, first and second floors, potentially some seating on the outside, some seating down on the first floor in the corner, with potentially what looks like a bar area right here, but only time will tell. These conditional use permits specifically in LA can be a bit harder to get and take a little bit longer due to community standards and different zoning requirements, so it's nice to see Tesla check this off the list. Next up, this report from Electric is very encouraging. As we know, so far Tesla's solar roof rollout hasn't been as fast as many of us would have liked. However, it seems like now they're shifting their focus to the proper place, focusing on new home builds rather than retrofits, because those retrofits have been very complicated and not an easy process. Sources have confirmed that Tesla is starting to plan new solar roof installations again for the fourth quarter, and the focus is on new houses like the ones in Easton Park. You may recall that deal we had talked about previously where Tesla would deploy solar roofs and Powerwalls on a large scale in a new community in Austin, Texas. This is that Easton Park project. And this isn't just some 5-home cul-de-sac, this is a 12,000 home development. One of the companies, Brookfield Asset Management, behind this development, on their site has these new homes listed with Tesla solar packages included. Now it's unclear how many of these 12,000 homes will include Tesla solar, but this is the type of stuff that we need to see Tesla expanding upon. This is just one anecdote, but one of the users that bought one of these homes with the Tesla solar said he did the cost benefit analysis and said there's a big cost savings for getting it at install. You may recall last month talking about Tesla planning to launch an electricity retail business in Texas, so potentially these new homes in Easton Park could be added to this new VPP for Tesla in Texas. It just seems like having a majority of these installers in one location working on homes that are similar at the same time, having all of the shipping and logistics really going to the same area should really expedite the rollout of Tesla's solar roof and of course expose it to more people. In the coming weeks, if we learn that customers are choosing these houses with the Tesla solar package at higher rates, that would be a very encouraging sign for things to come. Moving on, just a quick warning so you can potentially avoid something like this on the yoke steering wheel. It could be something to do with hand sanitizer or lotion, so Not that this is acceptable from Tesla's end, but just, if you want to avoid something like that, be careful what you have on your hands. Next up from Teslarati, Tesla has revised its initial filings for Giga Texas, and they did this yesterday, September 20th, now adding a potential 500,000 square foot expansion. Luckily, this time around, we don't have to guess what this extra land could be for, as Elon, I believe, gave us an answer, saying ecological paradise plans from the south portion of Giga Texas to the river look great. However, we must first get the factory financially on its feet. He added the area from South Giga to the river really will be next level great and open to the public. The long-term goal is a boardwalk with amenities that goes all the way to downtown Austin so you can walk, bike, or kayak. And then some will love this, Elon said, maybe, let's emphasize maybe, little electric Tesla boats with a retro futuristic Victorian design. In this drone video from Joe Tetmeyer, I just wanted to show you this indeed is the south portion of Giga Austin. So from this portion down this way toward the river, that's where this ecological paradise will be in the future. And yes, it could be 1, 2, 3 years before we see any of that actually develop. However, it's definitely exciting for the future. Here we have a different perspective of the south side of Giga Austin looking further south. So eventually to have a boardwalk where people can kayak and do things of that nature, maybe ride little electric Tesla boats. Also got me thinking I would love to fly to Giga Austin to pick up delivery of my Model Y or Cybertruck, hang out for a little bit for the weekend. Feels like something I need to put on my bucket list. Moving on, some of you in the comments have asked where I got some of those supercharger costs for a Tesla being around $40,000 and some of the competition being, around $200,000. Well, here is some proof. According to grant applications in Texas for a Tesla supercharger costs around $42,000 per connector. This compares with $100,000 to $250,000 per connector across competitors in the EU and North America. And add another notch to China's belt, as if we look at DC fast charger installations last year in China and the rest of the world compared to this year and the rest of the world, China once again leading the way by a large margin. The good news for the United States is now we have this Built in America mandate requiring chargers to be assembled in the US starting in 2023 and to contain 55% locally made parts by 2024 to qualify for federal aid. Next up, we get a quick preview of the upcoming new all-electric Volvo EX90. Set to have 8 cameras, 5 radar units, 16 ultrasonic sensors, and a forward-facing LiDAR. Just wanted to highlight the LiDAR system will be mounted on the roof above the windshield in an equipment pod. More importantly though, Volvo says its new LiDAR and sensor suite will eventually be standard on all of its models, so it looks like Volvo is going all in on LiDAR. Sticking on the theme of previews, we get some images of the Chevy Blazer SS, one of the top of the line electric models set to be on the roads next year for GM. This one should be in the neighborhood of $65,000. With a 17-inch touchscreen and a binnacle, are we still calling this a binnacle or a 2-screen display? The top of the line model is set to have 290 miles of range. This vehicle should compete directly with the Model Y Performance and the Mach-E GT. The charging port door is pretty large and it looks like it pops out and then drops down. The real question is, how are you guys feeling about the red interior? Chevy also choosing to forego having a frunk in the upcoming Blazer SS. Moving on, no surprise here, but it looks like Kia wants to start building cars in the United States as early as 2024 to take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act. And that's the whole article, but of course for both Kia and Hyundai, this should be a good move as it can continue to build upon some of that brand momentum that it already has when it comes to the EV market. Next up, for future potential Starlink investors, this is actually a pretty big deal as this JSX airline did a test with Starlink basically as a proof of concept. Now, hopefully this can help Starlink negotiate contracts with some of the bigger airlines like Delta and others, because so far SpaceX has been unsuccessful in negotiating with those companies. JSX tested Starlink on a regional flight from Burbank to San Jose, and it got speeds of 100 megabits per second when it comes to download speeds, allowing passengers to browse the internet, watch Netflix and YouTube, and they said even host video chats without difficulties. A separate report from Bloomberg said a dozen people were on that flight, but due to additional devices being on board, it boosted the demand to the equivalent of 20 to 30 passengers on the flight that were effectively using the system. As I said, the Starlink deals with JSX and Hawaiian that were announced recently came after SpaceX had pitched Starlink to 4 of the largest US airlines without success. A telecom analyst said this is a foot in the door for Starlink. Once it works on JSX, it will work everywhere. The CEO of JSX said, "I'm thrilled it exceeded my expectations. Of course though, the real test will come on a cross-country flight when there are 100+ passengers," and it said days after that JSX flight, there was a cross-country trip on American Airlines with more than 100 passengers delivering around 2.2 megabits per second. So the bar is pretty low. So SpaceX is definitely in the midst of trying to break into the major airline market. On that note, Elon said with some improvements, it will achieve 300 megabits per second. Moving on, today we heard from the Federal Reserve and Jay Powell. They have bumped the federal funds rate up 75 basis points as expected. Now the federal funds rate sits at 300 to 325 basis points, or 3 to 3.25%. However, the real conversation is, where do we go from here? So looking at the summary of economic projections from the Federal Reserve Board members, looking at the median estimates. For 2022, by the end of this year, the projected federal funds rate across the board members, now note this is not a consensus or anything set in stone, as this is all subject to the incoming economic data. However, they have it at 4.4%. Remember, right now we're at 3 to 3.25. This, of course, would imply another rate hike of over 1% before the end of this year. Additionally, everyone in the markets is wondering when the Fed will pivot, basically stop raising rates and maybe even reduce rates. Well, looking out to 2023, that federal funds rate is still going up, potentially hitting a peak of around 4.6%. Meaning this Fed pivot everyone is waiting for may not happen until sometime well into 2023. There were numerous times in his speech when Powell said he's willing to do whatever it takes to get the inflation rate back down to 2%, and that he's going to have the federal funds rate be in a restrictive place for an extended period of time. Remember, 2.5% is supposed to be the normal rate, so anything above that would technically be considered restrictive. But Powell said where we're at right now, 3 to 3.25%, is in the lowest level of what is restrictive, and that there's a long way to go, so more rate hikes incoming. But look at how these median projections for the federal funds rate have changed. These numbers are from June, and fast forward today, these are the numbers we were just looking at up here. Back in June, the members of the Federal Reserve had a median estimate projection of 3.8% for the federal funds rate. That's now gone up to 4.6%, as we just talked about. And for 2022, back in June, the estimate was 1.7 for the real change in GDP. They've now bumped that down to 0.2 for 2022. And just for some context, we haven't seen the federal funds rate above 4% for some time. The last time we saw it was actually going back to the end of 2007. So the moral of the story is we are definitely not out of the woods yet, but for me, somebody with a longer investment time horizon, this really doesn't mean anything. I just keep buying Tesla no matter what's really going on until something fundamentally changes with Tesla stock, which personally I don't foresee happening anytime soon. Last up for today, shifting back to EVs. What did we just talk about yesterday? One of the bigger storylines, Chinese EV and battery makers looking to flood the Europe and United States markets. Well, now we have an electric vehicle battery maker, Chinese, that wants to build a multi-billion-dollar plant in West Michigan. Project set to cost $3.6 billion, could add 500 jobs to start, which seems very low. Eventually 2,000 though over 10 years. The The Michigan authorities are set to designate the land as a Renaissance zone, exempting the company from property taxes for decades. A township supervisor would not confirm the company as Goshen, but he did say it is a Chinese battery manufacturer. And important to note, there are still numerous processes and steps to be taken before this project becomes a certainty, but as I said, it's something to watch. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Please like the video if you did, and a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.